Okay, it's 7 o'clock, October 23rd, and we will with the quorum, President will take a roll call vote, but Jill's on the remote. So
Mather Eldred, present. Brent Nelson, present.
Peter Michelson, present.
Deb Carter, present.
Ed Bozella, present.
Steve Callahan present,
Bob Swaney, present.
Emily McCabe, present.
and Jill.
Jill Rafter participating remotely.
Great. All right. Well, today's agenda is here. It's basically we are recording this meeting made available later on for for anybody to listen to. This is our agenda. Basically, we're gonna approve some minutes. Everybody had a chance to look at them. We quickly look at the calendar. But it's we're going to talk about the capital stabilization fund appropriation request. And Brent will take us through that, and then we have a 5-year revenue and expenditure forecast that Frank will take us through. And we'll talk about a few items in the revenue area and pension reserve, and then get some updates from committees and any update from town finance. So with that, I guess we will entertain. Did everybody have a chance to? Peter sent around his masterpiece of minutes. Everybody, you didn't get them. Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay.
You just read it. It's only 7 pages.
Did everybody else have a chance to? Okay. I mean, do you want to take a vote on these now?
Move to approve the minutes of September 26th as presented.
Yeah, and if Emily, if you want to abstain, that's fine.
Second.
Second. Okay, we're going to take a vote.
I'll vote yes with the caveat that you can just correct the spelling of my name on page 6. Awesome. That's it. Yes.
I'll just note that when I initially wrote that paragraph, I wrote, Mather Eldred made the very good point. And then I thought, I really shouldn't editorialize quite like that, so I just made the point. So, yes, approved.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Emily, do you want to abstain?
Yeah.
Okay. So that, and Jill, do you have?
Yes.
A vote? Yes, okay. So motion passes eight yeses, 1 abstention. Okay.
Unlikely to see the likes of those minutes again.
I guess say, Peter, you set the bar high.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't have the October 10th minute meetings yet. Yeah, Brent's still working on those. And this meeting is Jill. Jill, you're the minute taker.
I am.
Responsible for this meeting. We have a meeting on November 13th, which is about 3 weeks away. It's our only meeting in November, and if we need one, we have a date in December. But that next meeting, hopefully, we'll be able to provide some final budget guidance to both the town departments and the school, and finalize that guidance to them. Okay, so in terms of the next agenda items, really it's the capital stabilization fund and the appropriation request. Brent, do you want to?
Yeah, it'd probably be simplest if you, I guess, the document that was sent around as part of the package, the current stabilization fund request.
So that looks like It's
the fun.
what,
Yeah, that's fun.
Is it
Two of them.
possible to put on the
Is
screen?
that this?
yeah, let me see if I can put that.
Looks like this. So,
Yeah.
right, it's a little PDF file with a spreadsheet looking thing. Would it be possible to put on the screen, or just because I go through but each one line by line?
Yeah, just give me a second, I gotta figure out how to do that. So it's,
Yeah.
everybody see that? Yeah. Okay.
And so, just to set the context for this, you add the items in the first category, plus the two items that are in the held category that are probably likely to be funded. It's just under 1.5 million, which appears to be sort of the amount of recent past, and if you look forward to FY 26, probably the amount that's going to be requested for the capital stabilization fund. So that's I guess now a pretty stable number to be expecting to come out of this fund. It's replenished, as you know, from free cash, basically. So gives you a sense of the total aggregate amount of requests that the town sort of encourages from the departments and the units to be drawn from the capital stabilization fund. I went through it. I'd say of these items, we've seen the actual estimate for most of these things, and they concur with the numbers you see there, plus or minus $1,000 here or there. And I've also compared it with the 5-year capital improvement plan, which fortunately you actually have here in your hand on page 245. And it's helpful sometimes to look at these and say, which of these were anticipated, going back even 2 or 3 years, which are new. I'll try to point that out. In other words, they weren't in this document, and which were anticipated, but whose dollar amounts have changed. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of a theme, especially when it comes to vehicles. Prices are going up pretty fast. So, something that was put down as a place marker 3 years ago for this FY, the number is not necessarily what you see in the document. So let's go through it. So the first item was not in this. So it's $80,000 being requested to fund both the purchase of software and a consultant to help set it up and configure it to host town, basically town documentation that interfaces with the citizens. So to create a situation in which citizens can access permits, town documents, I suspect make certain types of payments. Motivated proximate cause in large part due to the incidents that we talked about at our last meeting. Seemed like an opportune time to modernize the town interface. You'll note that below this, if you scroll down on the screen, or if you're looking at the document, there's $30,000. That's been an annual allotment for town computer and server upgrades. That's been removed in part because it's folded into this $80,000 request. And the premise would be that after this has been done, the ongoing licensing would be part of the operating costs of the various units in the town. So that's the first item. So that's new. The second item is for replacement of hoses for the fire trucks. This was actually in the document from the past at a smaller dollar amount. The plan had been to do piecemeal replacement, but the chief of the fire department says that there's an opportunity now to, if you do it all at once, you can kind of do it in aggregate for a lower dollar amount than if you did it separately. So he's asked to bring forward some of the replacement. bring it to a total amount of 92,000. 91,000. The next item is replacement of a F-350 with plow to a F-550 truck with plow. That was in there, price gone up a little bit from where it was in the past. The next item, replacement of a 6-wheel dump truck. So that's replacing a truck that's very old, over 30 years, apparently, 1988.
Well,
Quite a while.
that was one of my questions, is how old is the existing one?
So the F-350, I have somewhere how old it is, but this 6-wheel dump truck that's being replaced is quite old. So it's going to be replaced to have a plow and a sander. It's going to take a couple of years because of the backlog it takes to get these trucks, even when you place the order. So that was moved forward.
Really?
Yeah. It'll take 2 years. We'll take possession of it actually in calendar year 25.
So. Why, if we're not gonna actually buy this or pay for it till then,
Well,
why? You encumber it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be transferred out of the capital budget into a special article in case it comes in before then.
All
But
right.
you don't wanna,
So,
put
yeah.
it off because you need to actually
Right,
have the funding available to order
right. So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
basically encumbering it through the article.
Can't order
Yeah.
it until-
Yeah.
all right, so definitely, that's probably the biggest single item on the list. Cemetery mower needs to be replaced for $17,000. That's quite a bit larger mower than your typical homeowner's lawn. The next one, so this is an ongoing annual allotment, $185,000 for, it's in addition to grant funded work on the roads for pavement. So that's been something that's been in the budget for a while. The town's variable sign, electronic sign that you see when you go into the public, to the transfer station. Apparently now it can't work independently without being plugged in. So it has solar panels, so you can put it anywhere in town. It just runs. That part's failed. So the plan is to buy a new one, but we'll still keep the old one. So we'll have two. One that just needs to be somewhere where it could be plugged in continuously, and the other that can be moved around town as needed. There had been a plan, if you look at this document, to purchase a police vehicle, but the chief of police came back and said that she would rather us purchase a motorcycle to add to the fleet for greater mobility, a little bit smaller footprint when they're out there on the side of the road. So that's in a sense replacing a line item of 55,000. It's an improvement plan with one at 33,000. The tasers update, that was not in this document because it was discovered that the tasers warranty had expired, the ones that they had. In principle, they're still effective, but liability would suggest that you should probably be under warranty. And so the decision was made to just replace them. That is the $72,000 is one taser per officer. And they would have a warranty of 5 years. So the premise would be after 5 years, you'll see this kind of charge again. Then
Even if they're not discharged,
I think,
they're not used.
I think if I were to put words in the chief's mouth, she would say that safety first. So her premise would be if they're not under warranty, we'd be better off making sure that we had ones that were. I think you can buy you can pay more for a longer lifetime on these, but the decision was made to ask for a 5-year lifetime warranty at the $72,000 price point. And again, I mean, if you would like more information, I would go back and ask.
No, I'm just curious.
She's in the building. I can have her pop down if you have a specific question about it. Yeah, we'll check and see if she's going.
So the school information technology, so that $300,000 has been the request, for example, last year, I believe the year before that as well. There was some discussion within the capital budget committee to maybe it's about time to look at what actually was spent.
Well, that's my question. Do we have is that broken down, that 300 into
Not that I've
what
seen.
So we have no detail.
There's
So
no
The
detail.
details don't exist. I personally haven't seen it.
We have that.
Yeah, I can,
So I
can
think,
send that around.
the premise would be to take a look at, because at some point, if you look at especially if you go back last year, if you look at the improvement plan, there was a tapering of this amount foreseen by this time. And it's not, we're still entertaining the request of 300,000. So the question would be, well, is that, how is that money being spent? Or can we anticipate that 300,000 is sort of the cost of constant equipment upgrade, which is mostly routers, projectors, so it's capital equipment for sure, but it's the kind of thing. So I should just, jump ahead and say that I wasn't at the Friday meeting, but at that meeting, one of the things that was brought up was the decision to try to go deeper into a life cycle assessment of all the things that we're purchasing on a regular basis, like the tasers of 5 years. And I think that'd be a great time to kind of take a look at some of those things, like the projectors, like the routers, and simply ask, okay, is that every 3 years, every 5 years, so we can understand better these recurring requests. And we kind of understand things like vehicles, backhoes, dump trucks, but when it comes to things like routers and projectors, it's not really clear.
So this is not computers. This is other technology.
It's not anything that's used by the students. It's used either by instruction or the backbone infrastructure.
Okay.
That's my understanding. And to some extent, software licensing, but not a lot of that, because some of that's in the teaching operation.
Right.
Yeah, and we have technology in all the schools at this point, right?
It's also
Even
security. I mean, that's another big aspect, but that goes under this too, because all of the door locks, cameras, they're all tied in to the IT infrastructure. So
Okay.
Do we get actual, when we, like last year's 300,000, is there detail of what was actually spent within that 300?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be good to know. I mean, it's the largest item. It's the largest item every year, pretty much.
Right.
yeah, I mean, last year when we were going through this, I did talk, because that was my department, IT. I did see it, but I didn't have historical context to know how that differed from any previous year. So,
Right.
well, we think we've got to take a look.
Oh, yeah, because I know we usually have within the budget, money for computers for the kids. That
In the operating
in the operating
Yeah,
budget.
yeah.
For replacement. And I remember, I forget, this is Ian, I remember we were talking, Owen, talking to this at one point.
So the final item there is vehicle replacement. So that is a 1999 Ford F-250 that we replaced. I haven't seen the actual purchase order or estimate for that, so I don't know whether $60,000 is what it costs to replace the vehicle, or whether that's also going to be contributed to a second vehicle. I don't know, because the request is for vehicles plural, as you see, well, it says vehicle replacements plural. So I'd like to take a look, but unless facilities came in and spoke to this on Friday when I wasn't there, I haven't seen that. So.
Well, do you guys know?
Yeah, so they came on Friday, because they also presented their municipal buildings request, which is obviously separate from all this. They have a schedule of, I want to say 4 or 5 vehicles that they're trying to replace in individual order. This would be for one of them. So I will go back and watch the meeting.
That's one vehicle.
It's just what is one vehicle.
Oh, quick question.
Vehicle.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't get my camera to work, so I apologize. What do they do with the old vehicles, like both the public works and facility vehicles?
So it depends on the age of them and their efficiency. Since we are a green community, we cannot always repurpose them for other departments. So sometimes we simply do a trade. I believe this vehicle is in such disrepair that they're looking to replace. They can't even get it to pass inspection. So I'm not sure what our plan is for this one at this point.
Okay. But mostly they would trade in some of this equipment and get the pricing down. Is that typically what happens?
If we can, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And just so I forget what our policy says when there's
Just those things
a
they say.
sale of an asset. where's that?
money goes into?
Usually we use it to offset those costs.
Yeah,
You would,
yeah,
okay.
A trade in on vehicle,
Yeah.
that's what we usually do.
Okay, yeah.
In this case, it would be nice if they just took it off our hands.
It's gotta be something for
Right,
scrap, right?
So most, let's say, with the exception of things like the variable sign and the cemetery mower, the tasers, most of these things were in the improvement plan from previous years. For the vehicles, by and large, the prices have gone up. But in other cases, it was spot on to where it was expected to be. So that's the 1.235 million. Last two held items. Let's talk about the sidewalk master plan. So I think there's great appetite to approve or recommend approval of the $150,000 towards the sidewalk master plan. The question, I think, is to see what the master plan has in it in terms of prioritization. And at least from my perspective, sort of asking as we go out 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, is 150,000 consistently per year a meaningful number? Because I think if you look at the total to fund the entirety of the sidewalk master plan, it's in the millions. And so $150,000 a year doesn't get you very far. So I think the only reason that's being held is that we're waiting to have a presentation, a deeper presentation on that. I don't think there's any misgiving about getting it started. $150,000 buys you basically half a mile of sidewalk rehab and about 10 ADA compliant curb cut ramps. So per year, that's about what you could do. So it's not bad start.
And my understanding is that that aggregate number is what, 5 million?
A little over 5 million.
$5 million.
Yeah. But an awful lot of it is what they call tier D, which is a sort of, it's not necessarily the downtown area. And, I think one of the things that I'm just speaking for myself that I'd like to hear more about is concrete versus asphalt. 90% of our sidewalks are asphalt. And again, on the life cycle idea, how long does it take for a good asphalt sidewalk to become poor? Because when it becomes poor, it's now a candidate for rehab versus a concrete and so forth. So these are trade-offs that the Public Works Department would know very well, but it would just be interesting to learn them.
Right.
So we understand better what the $150,000 is doing. What it will buy will change from year to year as projects come and go. Right? So, the second item, the Hinckley Memorial paving at $105,000. That's in here. So that was something we've been expecting. Price has gone up a tiny bit. I'm not sure why that was held. So maybe somebody can help.
So I think it was held due to funding. Originally, Parks and Recreation had requested that the $105,000 come from the Capital Stabilization Fund. And I need to set up a meeting and talk to the Parks and Rec Commission and Katie Walper, who's the director of Parks and Rec, to determine why it wouldn't be coming out of the Parks and Recreation revolving fund. With the reason the fund was originally set up was so that Parks and Rec would be self-sustaining, both in terms of their programs and for capital expenditures. So I just need to have a conversation as to why they wanted that to not come out of the revolving fund. So.
And if you remember last year, it was like $80,000 for the building down at Hinckley that came out of their revolving fund, right?
Right.
It didn't come out of capital.
Right.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
capital item approved.
Yeah,
the
typically
funding came
their
out.
projects have always come out of capital, not capital stabilization fund. They have the ability to have that additional funding that the rest of the departments don't have. So I just need to have that conversation as to what the rationale is for that.
Yeah.
So next year, the parking area around McCarthy Fields is the next item. So.
Well, this parking lot, it definitely needs to be redone, the one in Hinckley, and they're gonna be putting in that big playground now. It's gonna get a lot more use.
Right.
So, I'm told there's like big potholes that people with babies have to navigate.
It's a disaster.
Huh?
It's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
So it's certainly, I
When
don't
it's
think it's
raining,
being
like-
held for lack of desire to do it.
Yeah.
So, So. More than I can
So
answer.
that's very helpful. It was another schedule. Let's see if I can do this, these are current capital requests, other funding sources. I don't know if you wanted to talk.
Sure,
about
we can run through that. So the first item there is long-term payment plan. We've been paying this number 48,000 towards the replacement of this engine 3. I'm not sure how many years have gone by, but there's another year or 2 left, I think. If we look at this document, quite at least through FY 28 still listed at 48,095. So we've seen that before. The dam restoration there, the Dowson Pond. Apparently the process of requesting and receiving that grant is still ongoing. So we've not yet received it. So that will need to wait. Okay. The other items down there you see are from the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund.
Quick question about the dam. Are we requesting 808,000 from the state? Or that's what we would appropriate if and when the state comes up with a grant?
No, we have done 2 years of grant requests for that. We were not successful. The select board now need to decide how they would like to proceed with that grant project, with the dam project. The dam project. It's been around for a while. So they'll meet with the neighbors of Danielson Pond and have that discussion.
So the grant's been.
We haven't been successful. Yeah. We applied the first year, we were told nobody receives it on the first year, so automatically apply for the second year. We applied for the second year, we were not successful again. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't submit a 3rd time, but in the meantime, I think we need as a town to make a decision on what the plan is for the dam.
I'm sure you're aware there was a Globe article, gosh, this is several months ago, about all the
Yes.
dams that are throughout the state, not just the local.
Yes,
thing.
and Natick just removed their south dam. And there was, if you've been driving up and down, you've seen a lot of signs about it. People were very upset about the removal of the dam, so I assume we'll have those same conversations going forward.
Okay.
And the chapter 90 road improvement, that amount is that's a pretty set amount that they fund every year.
That's a set amount we receive
Yeah.
from the state every year, based on the amount of mileage in town. And this is just what we anticipate spending this year. And that's usually just our crack sealing, milling and overlay, repaving projects, like we did on North Street a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That was paid for out of chapter 90.
So the last item, it's sort of below the scroll there. It's the lighting at Metacomet, the tennis courts. So that the piecing together the funding for that is a work in progress. But you can see that it's not requesting this time any money from the capital stabilization fund.
Is it
Well,
is it
can I-
earmarked piece to this? Is it-
To the lighting at Metacomet, yes.
Okay,
It's for, the markers for $100,000.
100, okay.
No, I haven't been able to play at night in several years because the lights are so terrible. That's the least of the problems with the Metacomet tennis courts. The courts are in horrible shape. And if I were prioritizing how town money was spent, I'd spend it on resurfacing, not the lights. That's Peter Michelson as private citizen, not warrant committee member speaking.
I
But
will
there's a,
pass that along to Parks and Recreation.
the what I will call court one, the first court in, there's like a slope that I try to avoid that court like a plague because I'm afraid I'm gonna twist an ankle on it or something. And a lot of the other courts, I mean, every game you play, I'm going on for far too long, but the ball will hit a spot and just die. There's dead spots all over the place. So And, you apologize to your opponent, you just hit a dead end. You won a point through no merit of your own, you just hit a spot where the ball never came up.
This is where the high school plays.
What?
The High school. kids
Yeah.
Local
play.
knowledge for the high school.
They must know exactly
Right.
where to hit it. Okay,
Emily, you're grinning like you're a tennis player, right?
No, I don't play tennis. I just live right there. So it's just funny. I didn't realize. I'll have to go check it out
Hmm.
myself.
there's a comment here from, Chris McHugh Potts. It may help to clarify the difference between capital stabilization and municipal stabilization fund. So, I'll do it for people who might be listening. I think, Kevin, we went through that on this committee, a couple meetings ago. But basically, the municipal building stabilization fund is anything associated with a building. So, it could be a school, it could be a town building, but basically anything associated with a building. And then, the capital stabilization fund is anything that's not a building, basically. That's the easiest way to think about it, yeah. So. Okay, so, let's see, if we can. Next item here, where's the next? Any other questions on that?
Question, please.
The next agenda item is, the 5-year revenue and expenditure forecast. And, I will, see if I can share that. There we go. Rick. Want to sort of take us through this,
Sure.
all this, great work you've done here?
So, this is a forecast, so it's nothing set in stone, and it's, we're not voting on budgets for future fiscal years at this point, but obviously to help to take a look and see where we may be, in a few years in terms of revenues, and expenses. So property tax revenue, obviously our biggest source of income. Fortunately, Prop 2.5 makes projecting the property tax levy very easy. You can take a look at our property tax levy for last year, increase it by 2.5%. And then add in new growth. Add in our debt exclusions, which, while they are a revenue source, basically help us pay off expenditures that we've already accounted for in our debt service obligations. So that gets us to our 5 years out of our total property tax levy. You'll notice the new growth sort of hanging around the mid $400,000 range. And then ticking up a little bit for Trinity's development, and then coming back down in 29 back to the mid 400 range.
The way, just a comment on that, the way this works is, it's not like we lose the hospital revenue from the hospital. It gets built into the beginning levy that grows by 2.5%. So you'll see in 27, the new growth is $1 million. And then there's he can go through the,
So basically, this total right here, or this plus this plus this become this here.
And the next year.
All that change all the way down.
So it's new growth added to the prior year.
Okay.
They're gonna have 2 years though, at $1,025,000.
Yeah, yeah. So he's got, and he can go through all the hospital impact to this forecast. He's got a
Right.
separate sheet on that, but
So
basically.
then it drops, right?
But, yeah, so the new growth kind of drops off. He's phased it in.
Yeah.
So right now, like
Over a
this
2-year period,
These-
rent up.
400 and 445s, those numbers, that's like, you know, someone could build a new house, someone could finish their basement, put on a new porch. Someone could open a factory or something and have a bunch of new personal, industrial equipment in there. But the $1 million would indicate a much larger development. So that's what we have that sort of in the out years. We've taken a relatively conservative, but I think realistic approach in the other revenue categories. I have a bunch of detail that sort of backs up all this summary page, and I'd be happy to share that. But for the state aid line item, we projected a 1% increase each year. Local receipts sort of goes up and down with the expected Trinity development, with the collection of permit fees, sort of go up 1 year and then come back down the following year because you only collect those types of permits one time. Other available general funds, the lion's share of that is the use of our pension trust fund to offset the assessments that we receive for the county, or excuse me, from the county. Funnily enough, fingers crossed anyway, fiscal year 29 will be the last year that we'll receive an assessment from Norfolk County for the retirement, or excuse me, an assessment of the size that we're used to. They should drastically decrease after fiscal year 2029 again. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. But next year when we update the forecast, that would not show until fiscal year 2030.
And that's, I'm sorry, you probably explained this and I didn't follow it. Why is it that fiscal 829?
That was a crucial piece of information I should have mentioned. So there's the county has said that they expect for the fund to be funded in 2030.
Oh,
So instead of paying
a fund for all of Norfolk County or fund for Medfield or?
all of Norfolk County.
Wow.
So basically, instead
Yeah,
of paying
they're-
for the benefits that we're still catching up on, in the future, we'd only be paying for the benefits that are currently being expended to retirees.
Well, yeah, and there's another presentation, we'll go into detail, pension. But, yeah, the Norfolk County is ahead of a lot of other counties with fully funding. I think the goal was to get everybody fully funded by 2040. So they're ahead of that.
Okay. And so what we have is this trust fund that the town had previously been sort of socking money away in, that grew and grew and grew. And what we do now is use it to offset that assessment that we received from the county. That's at about, I think it's around $3 million. And so each year we project to take a little bit more and more out of it to offset that cost as those assessments rise. And we've done that conservatively, and Steve will talk about this.
So there's a presentation on that, we'll take you to.
The enterprise offset, for those that don't know, is they're basically expenses that the general fund makes on behalf of our water and sewer enterprise funds. So the water and sewer enterprise funds basically reimburse the general fund for things like employee benefits for water and sewer employees, debt service, all that type of stuff. And you'll see that generally declines over time. Not because we are being overly conservative or paranoid, but because the main driver of that offset is debt service. And so that debt service is obviously expected to decline over time. So that's why it decreases over the course of the next 5 years. A huge crucial piece of this forecast is the last piece under the total other revenues. You'll see in 24 and projected for 25, We have $525,000 and $250 in each of those years projected to be allocated towards our OPEB, our OPEB liability. That's set in the town's financial policy. The funding source shown here is free cash. But beyond fiscal 25, to be overly conservative, but I think realistic, did not include any free cash to be used for the OPEB liability. It doesn't mean that we still can't do that, but just in case one day it turned out that we didn't have any free cash, it did not include that as a revenue source. When we get to the bottom and we see the deficits projected at the bottom of the spreadsheet, that's one of the primary drivers.
Yeah, he's added it back in the bottom to see.
Right.
So that gets us to our total revenue picture. If you scroll down a little bit, these are the shared fixed costs and insurance benefits that the town and school all pay. These tend to vary by category. They tend to go up by about 5 to 6%, if at all. You can see that Norfolk County item 2 up from the bottom. See it sort of trends upwards, but as I mentioned before, the amount that we take out of the pension trust also corresponds with that increase, so somewhat of an offset there.
But you can see he was talking about like in 2029, assuming that pension gets fully funded. The assessment for 2030 goes way drastically down, like it's, I think, $500,000. It goes from 4 million down to 500,000. So there's a big difference in that 2030 year, assuming everything gets funded by 2029. But
Not gonna lie, we have a countdown clock in our office.
the operating budget will have a lot of relief,
They do a lot of capital out, yeah.
Yeah.
Do a lot of everything, right?
Red Sox tickets for all.
Get 2 season tickets by then.
For most of those insurance types go up by 5% each year in the forecast. Health insurance, we projected 6%. The last item on the list, OPEB, is what I was just referencing. So this is the expense, which would be the contribution that the financial contribution that we would make into our liability or pay off our liability. So you can see it increases by 5% each year, which is per the town's financial policy. So that's the expense side of things. Up at the top, we were talking about revenue sources previously, and in this year's projection, we're saying that we're going to use free cash to pay off that expense. But again, you'll see that in the out years, we do not project that, so that affects the deficit that's projected. Debt service is pretty straightforward. That's per the town's debt schedule. The $48,000 expense, the third line item in there is the long-term lease that Brent already discussed. So you can see the subtotal of the debt and lease payments that are there. Expenditures not requiring appropriation, pretty self-explanatory. Overlay stays at $200,000. State aid offsets and state assessments we increased by 1%. I actually might need to check that state assessments figure in 2026.
Yeah, I think because then
It's gonna go
I think
down.
the hospital
will be fully off, so that's my bad. So that'll be another, whatever half of our payment is, 100, yeah, so that'll be another $150,000 that is reduced by. I apologize.
That's good. That helps.
I'll fix that.
So that'll go for all the years then, right? To take 150 out
Yes,
of every
yes, so
year.
I will correct that and just redistribute this. I'm sorry about that. Vocational assessment, this goes up 2.5% each year. We have a relatively small head count at the Tri-County Regional School. What this does not include is the potential for a capital assessment that would be assessed if the new school were to be built, which will be determined at tomorrow's election. We've been told that any such assessment would begin in fiscal 27. We have also heard that could start a little bit sooner, but that amount would be relatively small. The amount for Medfield in fiscal 27 would be somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000. But again, that number is dependent on the amount of students that we actually send to the school. So right now, I think we have 5 or 6. So that number were to increase, that number would change. We do, everyone does get,
So
a
the,
base amount.
if 25 students wanted to go in a certain calendar or academic year, then the assessment would go up for the next fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay.
We all are charged the same. So if for some reason Medfield started sending, or didn't send any students whatsoever, we would still be assessed sort of a base charge of 5 students.
Yeah.
So we're on the hook for something each year. So this is where we probably get most into the deficit drivers. Number 1 being, or not, number 2 being that OPEB item that I discussed previously. In the school and town departments, a sort of blanket 4% increase across all departments is assumed. That's sort of what we've been, off the initial analysis, what we've been looking off this year so far. So in keeping with that, it's applied to all years of the outreach of the forecast. And that's what gets us to our net of revenues and expenditures, which, as you can see, from 26 through 29 is obviously on the wrong end of the equation that you want to be on, but you know, it's a very preliminary look. It's meant to just give us a sense of you know, when can we afford or when can we not afford to do certain things. And like I said, I'm happy to share all the individual detail that goes behind this summary sheet.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think, you know, you can see that there's about $1.1 million,
Right,
but that assumes that the OPEB is funded out of the operating budget.
right.
That's about 600 grand, and then there would be another 120, 150 that he had found for the assessment. So, you know, 2026, it looks like there's maybe a $300,000 or $400,000, you know, issue.
Right.
Yeah. Which is really the only, I mean, the further out you go on this, the harder it is to forecast, but
Sure.
and they are very conservative in their assumptions here, so. Yeah. Yes. Did get a question from from Jill. She's got a problem with her computer restarting, but she had a question about, does the debt service only include debt in its projections? No new debt that may be anticipated.
No new debt, no.
It's just existing debt, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so it does not include, like, for example, a debt from a new school or something like that, right?
It's tied, actually tied back directly to the existing debt.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But that's a good reason to do the forecast, so you can say, oh, we have some capacity next year, maybe we could afford.
Yeah,
debt
yes.
service.
This is good. I mean, there is, I do think it's important to talk about the hospital assumptions that are built into the. Let me see if I can share that. Yeah, this is the
This is the latest thing that came out today.
yeah, this came out this afternoon, but
Yeah.
basically this Frank, these are the numbers that Frank used to update that forecast we just went through. So
Okay.
these are the assumptions that are in it. And you know, the first one that pops out that I know Christine will address is the timing of all this, right? What's the timing of when the hospital is going to, close and then, start construction and all that other stuff. The first thing to hit is the building permits, right? And, the actual agreement that's in place, allows for I think it's, 2 6-month,
2 6-month extensions.
6-month extensions. So it says that you're gonna close in March of 2024, but you have the ability to extend it until March of 2025. And so you'd say, well, why are we planning for 26, right? So that's the question, is like, is it on that timeline? And I think they've taken a conservative approach here, trying to push it out, because I'll let you comment about why that's the case.
So I think, they're still seeking their funding, from the Commonwealth, and we may or may not have received a MassWorks grant that may or may not be announced this week, but I'm not allowed to talk about it, until after Thursday. It's still, if we did get it, wouldn't encompass everything they need for the infrastructure. So I think at this point, I anticipate they're going to take at least the first of that 6-month, extension in the LDA, for closure. So, given that, we decided to take the conservative approach and not show them pulling their building permits until fiscal year 26.
They pay it as soon as it's due, as soon as they pull the permits.
Right.
So this, the conservative assumption here is that it goes into the fiscal 26. Because if it doesn't happen and we plan on it,
Right.
then that's another problem. I suppose if it happens and it's not in the budget, it becomes free cash, right?
Right.
Right. Everybody understand that?
No.
No?
Especially the last part.
Yeah, the last thing is gonna say, why?
So if they get the 2 6-month extensions and they're able to close before March of 2025
For the LDA.
for the LDA.
Yeah.
And they don't need any more time. Then they pull the permits in, say, April or May, they're gonna pay this 390, and it's gonna be in the fiscal 25 income. And so once it comes in, and if it's, right now, it's not in the FY 25 budget. Right, we're assuming that this doesn't happen in 25 for purposes of the budget assumption. But if it comes in, it'll just go to free cash.
The unanticipated revenue.
Right, let's figure it
It's
out.
not a bit of revenue, it's not your a specific property.
Yeah, does everybody follow that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, it's conservative, because if you budget it for it and then you don't control on the timing on this, right? It's gonna happen when it happens, but. If you budget for it and it doesn't happen, that's worse, right?
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Sorry, so Frank, I'll let you explain the rest of this.
Sure. So Steve, you just mentioned the building permits. This is all these numbers, by the way, were previously published across 2 different analyses that were published as the town was preparing to consider moving forward the development proposal or not. The property tax levy new growth, we already talked about a little bit. That's sort of why in the forecast, you see the new growth numbers in the $400,000 range go up like this and come back down to $400,000 in fiscal 29. And as Steve mentioned, that money sort of a one-time lump sum that gets back added into the property tax levy, and then gets following year increases by 2.5% in terms of what we can tax and collect. I forget the specific number of cars that are expected to come with the development. But it's about $60,000 each year that would be added to the motor vehicle excise levy. That's probably going to decrease after that, or would fluctuate a little bit with the way motor vehicle excise levy works. It really depends on the age of your car. So the total amount that we collect tends to go like this, because people buy new cars and they get old, and they buy new cars and they get old. So kind of varies, but we've used the $60,000 range to just use as a placeholder for the first few years. And then meals excise, which, hopefully there'll be more people out and about eating at restaurants, buying food, and hopefully we collect a little bit more money for it. In terms of the expenses, there was a one-time expense for a new plow at DPW. Medfield, the town of Medfield will be responsible for all the upkeep and plowing of those roads, or excuse me, the plowing of the roads.
That would be capital.
Yeah, so that,
Right.
it sort of corresponds with that one-time permitting request. Or excuse me, the one-time permitting revenues, we have this one-time, request for a new plow, in fiscal 27 likely. And then the analyses cited, specific, amounts for both school and non-school departments that we would expect to see once the units were fully, occupied. And so that's why you see the ramp up of, half of the amount hitting fiscal 29 and then doubling in fiscal 30, because at that point, we would expect the units to be populated.
It's the rent period after construction.
Yeah. And so the bottom is the net total of the revenue.
Yeah, that's a little misleading too. I think that, with this, if you remember, this project has a net positive impact to the operating budget.
Right.
It just so happens the way this math is done that they're not accounting for the cumulative property tax levy.
Right.
Each year, they're just adding up the
The
new growth.
This
you know,
is incremental.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So the school that's based on students, additional students. How many did? What was the estimate? Do you recall what the estimate was for number of new students once that's fully occupied?
for some reason, the number 60 is.
I think it was 68. I think it was 68. 6 in my,
63 or 68.
yeah.
That seems like a small number for the school then. I mean, I guess, yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
remember the units, the very few 3-bedroom units up there.
right. Now I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, well, yeah, of course, the 68 spread across all grades, who
Right.
knows?
Right.
So that's why it's probably more reasonable. Yeah, okay.
But a big piece of that school cost was special education. And then there was some additional teachers, you know, in there, but most of it, I wouldn't say almost half of it was special ed.
So these numbers are in the forecast,
Yes,
Yeah,
and what would we anticipate with that $1 million?
so that's a really great question, Bob, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this at the beginning. The forecast that we were going through previously is only for operating budgets. So I didn't take into account any sort of one-time payments or capital expenditures or things like that. So when you talk about the $1 million, would that be, is $1 million for us?
$1 million is goes to the school department.
Okay, so for are you asking about the school mitigation payment or the $1 million for the that the town received for the sale of the land?
Well, I suppose.
Okay, so for land proceeds, we have to put them in that special account that Andrew keeps under lock and key that we can only spend for capital purchases. So I did not include that in the operating budget forecast. And then for the school mitigation payment, I'm not aware of what the specific plan would be for that funds, or for those funds from the school committee, so I did not
Tax
include that.
mitigation.
Yeah, if you remember, one of the suggestions I had in my memo was to use both those amounts to help offset the cost of the new elementary school. Any other questions on this? I mean, every year they'll get better at forecasting this.
Sure.
But this was pretty good for the first time. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Food for thought.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
All right, so, other departmental revenue. Oh, actually, you want to do interest income first? I don't have a slide for that, but.
Sure. So.
So I asked Frank to talk about, some of the local receipt items like, interest income, other departmental revenue. And, we already covered the building license and permit one, but. You know, those are sort of bigger items that there were sort of, you know, big differences between prior years and like we we might benefit from a better understanding of how those assumptions work in the budget.
So I think the question came up, what is a big number, but also in, when we were reviewing, what was contributing to the free cash totals. Investment income was, a big factor. So we had estimated $300,000 worth of investment income, for the town in fiscal year 23 and collected $830,000. And in fiscal year 24, we budgeted for $500,000. Before I go any further, I should just clarify, so the investment income that we collect is not via stocks or anything like that. It's basically interest that we accrue and earn on our depository accounts. And so when we're looking ahead for fiscal 25, we're trying to figure out what the interest rate environment is going to be from July 2024 until June of 2025. So obviously we're a little bit out from there, but you know, using the information that we have now, we come up with sort of a conservative and realistic approach to how to determine that number. So the primary account where we earn our interest is what's called the Massachusetts Municipal Depository, or excuse me, Massachusetts Municipal Depository Trust, MMDT. And it's basically a pool investment vehicle that municipalities have access to keep their funds. Our average balance in that account sits at about $16 million. There's other accounts that we have that also earn interest, but they tend to be more transactional in nature, so they don't sit there for long periods of time. Money tends to go in and out, or the balance that's in there tends to vary. So if we were to receive a grant or issue debt and have the bond proceeds sitting in an account somewhere, that money would sit in that account and earn interest, but that isn't as stable. The balances aren't as stable or constant as the balance in our MMDT account, which again, as I said, is about $16 million. So we're looking at the rate environment for, like I said, July of next year through June of the following year. We, right now on that account, we're earning at about 5% interest. We think, given some of the news that's come down recently, that those rates will probably take down in the second half of, the first half of calendar year 2025. So we are using a sort of a quote unquote blended rate of 4% for fiscal year 25. And that gets us in the mid $600,000 range in terms of an estimate. I think as things progress and we get closer to fiscal year 25, that's a total or an estimate that we can monitor and potentially modify. But right now, that's sort of where we sit at in terms of a conservative estimate for investment income.
A couple of questions here, Frank.
Yeah.
Are we obligated to get into that MM? Are we by law? So we just elect to use that?
Mhm.
That's a variable rate, obviously,
Yes.
but FI is pretty good. Do we have in our charter or bylaws the ability to invest in other short-term, maybe government securities, or when you look at the CD rates there, which are,
Yeah, I mean, I think,
we have,
I mean,
The treasurer has
the
some,
treasurer has
has the
authority.
ability to do that. That comes under her purview, and she has withdrawn money and put them in CD environments right now based on what they're earning.
okay,
But the 16 million in the MMDT, she puts the majority of the money in there because of the safety and security
right,
of that fund.
okay,
It's actually, it's just basically a money market fund.
yeah,
And so, it's fairly safe. And there's, I think there's 60% of the 70% of the communities in Massachusetts,
use that.
municipalities use this. So if there was ever an issue with it, it'd be a huge problem, right, for the whole state.
Yeah.
The rate is excellent.
That is,
Yeah,
that is
the
very
rate is
good.
excellent. Yeah.
So
So there's,
go ahead.
so just, so there's 16 million in this, and then she has another 8 million that is in other types of investments like CDs and stuff like that. This is just the general fund.
Mhm.
and we talked at last meeting about some of the variances from what we budgeted last year and what actually came in at. And there were two big reasons why it kind of came in higher, well, three actually. The rates was number one. But the water treatment plant bond offering was invested and earned
Okay.
4% interest.
Yeah.
And then the other item was
ARPA money.
ARPA money, right? Yeah, so ARPA money. So those two things are not gonna recur, going
Sure.
forward. And this is one of those items where you have to, it's hard, it's, we're in a gray area here in terms of where do we think rates are gonna be for 18 months out. And we kind of have a good idea of what the balances are
Yeah,
that are gonna get invested. But there's a range, I think, here of where, what's reasonable, right? A reasonable assumption would tell you somewhere between 4 and maybe 4.5, 4.75, because
sure.
they're gonna stay high for most of 2024, but then everything I read is that they could be cut. They won't be cut by a lot, but they could start cutting.
Right.
And so you don't want, because it's a revenue item, you don't want to overestimate it,
Yeah.
right? Gotta be conservative. So.
We're always thinking and always looking at the income statement. We never look at the balance sheet. It might be interesting sometime to go through the balance sheet of the town in total. Because then it just, when you hit me, like that 16 million, then another 8 there, and you get 24 million in the balance sheet.
Yeah.
But we never, we've never really focused on the balance sheet, just as, and I know we're more
Well,
concerned with the income statement,
Yeah.
but it'd be interesting to go through
Well,
that
it's
sometime.
yeah, no, it's a good point. We maybe when the audit's done,
Yeah,
we could share the balance sheet for the committee. They've got 3 or 4 different balance sheets, so we're gonna look at the one that's meaningful, but yeah, and I think that's
one for book, one for tax, one to show the auditors.
on the county was crazy. As Andrew will attest, so how many balance sheets do we have?
A client found out for different types of bond,
Yeah.
they had 3 sets of books like that. Oh my
We're just interested in part of the general fund.
Really.
Never done.
My first year in public accounting.
Thanks.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
so anyway, any questions on the interest rate assumptions that we've put into the forecast? Okay,
Not about that,
okay,
probably just my failure of comprehension, but we project revenues around $72 million, but at any given time, 16 million is sitting in the MMDT. Where is that?
so it's
Where does
basically,
that derive from?
well, it's timing differences between when they collect taxes and when they have to use it to pay payroll, stuff like that, so it's basically, these are operating cash accounts, basically,
So as the quarterly tax payments come in,
yeah,
they get put into there and it's available immediately. Well, we've got payroll due in 2
Yeah.
weeks, we'll just draw down X million dollars or whatever it is.
yeah. So, I mean, 20 to 24 million sounds like what they have invested. That's about a quarter, if it was 80 million revenue, it'd be a quarter of it, so.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of makes sense to me that,
Yeah.
But it's basically the timing difference between, when they have to spend it and when they collect it, they carry a balance. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, I just was thinking about how it's kind of like the town's checking account.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
essentially.
Right,
Right.
But
Yeah.
that you can actually get where it's on a week ago.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, okay.
Okay, other departmental revenue.
So this is another one that tends to fluctuate, and I'll be happy to walk through that now. So we had estimated, $339,350 in 23, collected, 675,402. And then in fiscal year 24, we budgeted, 277,350. So on the spreadsheet here that we had sent around, it sort of breaks down the individual categories that make up that general category of other departmental revenue. So you can see all the departments here. I don't know, there's probably 15 or 20 of them. And then in the years where it looks like there's a little bit of a jump, I tried to add some notes that will hopefully add some context. So if we start with the town administrator's office, if we were to look at fiscal year 23 and say, you know, why did we receive $92,000? Why aren't we predicting that again in future years? That was a one-time payment for our opioid settlement funds. You recall at town meeting last year, all which we established the opioid settlement stabilization fund, so all future receipts would just go right into that fund. However, when we had received these payments totaling 92,000 or so, we had not had the stabilization fund yet, so they sort of sat in an account until we were ready to move them into the stabilization fund. Miscellaneous revenue in fiscal year 22, you see it went up considerably. I would defer to Andrew on this one, but I think there were a number of old accounts that had old balances in them that were closed out into the general fund that soon turned into free cash. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory in terms of what the fees actually are. So lien certificates, conservation would be other types of application fees. For planning, you'll see that that's another one that went up considerably in fiscal year 2023. And you know, we might logically ask, well, why are we predicting that again? So that was a one-time payment for Trinity. They had to file some preliminary plans with the planning board that were then reviewed by the planning board. So that was around 39,000. And again, that was a one-time payment that we wanted to forecast in future years. What's another one that might be a little bit of a mystery? Further down, the public safety building, SREC revenue. Those are revenues that we receive for the solar panels that are on this building. Fire administration are for permits and inspections that the fire department issues. I actually learned a great deal going through this list and learning about all the different things that the different departments do and collect fees for. So that was an interesting conversation with the chief. Ambulance charges, I called out this one just so that everyone understands that this is separate from the advanced life support ALS service that the department offers. This is the basic life support, so all of our ALS fees go right into our ALS revolving fund. These fees are collected as other departmental revenue. And Chief Carrico was comfortable with the $120,000 amount forecast for fiscal year 2025. Sealer would be, sorry, Peter.
What's the difference between the ALS and the BLS, basic life support? What?
If you're having a heart attack, it's ALS. It's a
Okay.
different team, actually.
BLS is you sprain your ankle on the Metaconic courts.
Yeah.
got you. We got you.
No, that's ALS.
Let's see, some of the other ones, highway issues a number of permits for street openings or charging folks for disposing of their mattresses, things like that. That was pretty constant, but again, just to explain what it actually is. Transfer station stickers. The 250 that we're projecting for fiscal year 25 is pretty much what we collected in 23. You'll see that in 21, which was also a year where their stickers were up for renewal, it was up at 274. But we know that looking at motor vehicle excise data, that there are less cars registered in Medfield now than there were in fiscal year 21. So we expect that to not shoot back up unless people start buying more cars again, which then of course going to adjust the forecast. Those are the big ones. So that's how we get to the 456 total.
All right, so. So we talked about the Norfolk County retirement systems, it's a fairly large budget item. The assessment was 3.4 in the budget. And Frank sort of took you through, you mentioned this pension reserve offset. But I sent this out, I don't know if people had a chance to look at it. I'll kind of go through it fairly quickly, but unless there are questions, but the system itself, go through some background benefits, contributions, the actuarial assessments and evaluation. There's a funding schedule. And then we'll talk about the pension reserve fund. And then what the forecast has in it for the next 4 or 5 years. So for people who are new, the pension benefit is basically it's invested, and all the actuarial assumptions, everything is administered by Norfolk County. It does not include current or retired teachers, but does include like the school administration, people who are not, teaching as part of the school system. And then so they have their own, the teachers have their own retirement system that's administered by the state. So it's not part of the Norfolk County system. And basically it's a benefit that they get up to 80% of their highest 3-year average annual rate, regular compensation. There's an exception if you were hired prior to 2012. You get the highest 5-year average after that date. And then they're based on the age, the length of service, the level of compensation, and your group classification. And you get vested after 10 years of working, for this valid. So it's a pretty good benefit. There's 2 pieces to this. There's the part that the employees contribute, and then the town contribution piece. The contributions from active plan members, they range from 5 to 9% of their gross regular compensation, with an additional 2% contribution required if your compensation goes over $30,000. So effectively, it's like 7 to 11%. And then the town also contributes to the plan, and that's mandated by legislation. And it's based upon the contributions are based upon actuarial valuations and assumptions that are done. They're required to make this contribution every year for the unfunded piece of this liability that is in place. These are benefits that were promised to people to which we didn't have funded, we were unfunded. So what's going on is they're trying to fully fund the unfunded piece by 2029. And these are just some numbers of the assessments and where they are. So you can see the assessment comes from Norfolk County, their retirement system. It's been about it's gone from 2.5 million up to it's now 3.4 in 2025. They changed the way they did their assessments last year, and we benefited from that. If you notice in 24, we had a slight decrease, but the forecast for next year is a 4% increase. But we were getting early on, 9-10% increases in this assessment. And you'll see later on that the projection that they provide is like a 5% projection between now and when it gets fully funded. These are just, this is basically last year's slide. We don't have the information for 23 yet. But this is the liability that the town has. This is Medfield's share of the pension liability. This is, so it's going in the right direction, you can see, but again, these can swing like millions of dollars depending on the assumptions that are made when they come up with these numbers. You know, interest rates, investment returns, how much salary increases are going to happen. So it'll be interesting to see when they update this next, what happens to the liability. That will give us a good idea whether they're on track for fully funded or not. But this was from last year. This is basically their, I don't know if you can see this, but basically this is their funding schedule, which you can see. This is for the whole Norfolk County retirement system. So they do project out what the employer, piece of this is, and it's basically 4.5–5% increases that are going to get assessed in the forecast. But look in 2030, you can see that the as a percentage of payroll cost, it goes from 26.9 down to 3.2. It's a huge drop off. And our piece of that obviously is, is much less.
How long have they been working on getting this caught up?
Oh, gosh. What did you
What
know?
the first year was, I'd have to go back and look, I can't. I don't
Just
know.
curious if it was like
It probably,
years,
it probably,
years.
10 years, yeah.
it's at least 10.
It's at least 10.
It probably goes back to when this pension reserve fund was set up, which was like,
Decades ago.
it was like 30 years ago. Yeah,
2006.
Yeah, it was, no, in 2000, yeah, maybe 2000, I don't know when it was.
I don't remember.
Actually, we have, we think we
So
have.
that means in 2030, the employee and employer contribution from their payroll will go
1978,
way down. Big salary
1978.
increase in those years.
Well, the employee
wow.
contribution will stay the same,
Oh,
yeah, because it's a percentage
oh,
of
that's
your
right,
salary.
because
Yeah.
that's right, that will
Yeah.
stay the same
Yeah,
based on
yeah.
that point, yeah, but the town will benefit.
So this is somebody asked when.
Yeah, 1978,
So this is
$10,000.
so our former town administrator, God bless his soul, was a smart man and he thought ahead. He created this pension reserve trust fund with $10,000 in 1978. And it basically is like a stabilization fund to take care of he knew this was coming, that there's going to be big increases to fund this thing. And you can use this to offset, that's the purpose of it. It can only be used to offset increases to the assessment on the pension. And so it's been invested for 40 years. And they've taken some small transfers in the past for, for income to offset, but they really didn't make any, we didn't go back more than 20, I think. They couldn't find any big contributions in the past 20 years, but the balance is 3.4 million. That says as of June 30th, but it's actually, I found out it's actually September 30th.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the question, that we always struggle with is, well, if we have all this money in this reserve trust fund, how do we use it? And what's the prudent way to assume how much do you use every year? And so I updated this from last year. You might remember, those who were here last year, you might remember this. This is basically, you see the FY23, I put in the current balance, which is about 70,000 higher than what we had forecasted last year because of the investment income. But it's 3.4 million there. And then probably, I guess I don't have the column on here. I must have cut off the column, but basically this, I apologize for that. So I'll explain the columns here, but basically the column, which is right here, is the balance in the reserve fund. And the Norfolk County assessment is this first column here. Okay. So, in FY, you can see in FY 24, the assessment was 3.296. And we used 275,000 out of the reserve fund. And to basically get the operating, and the impact of the operating budget is 3,021,000. Okay, so we basically used 275 to reduce the assessment and reduce and minimize the impact of the operating budget. So this column is the net to the operating budget, hit to the operating budget. And so in 25, the way this works is there's some assumptions down here, which are basically that the assumption is that the assessment escalates, that first column escalates by 5%. Payroll cost goes up by 4%. The transfer, we've already decided on the 24 transfer. That was decided last year. The investment return on the balances is the assumed rate of return is 4%. And then the other big assumption is that we've limited the increases to the operating budget to 2.5%. So if you fix this column here, the operating budget, so you take last year's 3,021 and you increase it by 2.5%. The 3,096 is basically last year's 2.5%. That's what is in the forecast for on a net basis. And that means we have to take out 337,000 from the 3.4 million assessment to get down to that number of 3,096. There's people following that?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, and that leaves us with $3 million basically in the reserve fund. And so when you escalate this by 2.5% every year, you end up taking out, an increasing bigger amount every year, right? But the balance in this reserve fund, last year, this was like 70,000 less. It was like 80,000. It was like 870 or something like that.
Right.
But because, it was invested at a higher rate than what we assumed, there's more left there. So at any rate, this leaves you with about a little less than $1 million in the reserve fund if we take out 337,000 from it. And we've tried to design it this way so that we're taking the big withdrawals occur later, later in the schedule. And you can see in 2029, 2030, our assessment is estimated to be $500,000. So you can see this is like a big savings, like a $3 million savings to the operating budget, in that 2030 year. And there will be some money in this reserve because in the event that they don't have all of the, there's still additional assessments that come through after that date, which could very well happen.
Right. Plus all those other.
And we could always use this to offset even the, some of it can be used to offset current assessment. So that's sort of it's conservatively set up with conservative assumptions and not draw down this thing too quickly in case, because we don't know what these actual evaluations are going to come back.
Right.
Or if they're going to get to a fully funded plan by 2029.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we can't wait it doesn't make sense to wait to not use this
Right,
$3 million until the end, right?
right.
So,
No, that's it.
So. Apologize for this in advance, but when, no, I have followed what you said. And you seem, and you really know public accounting and I don't, you seem to trust their numbers that by around fiscal 29, they'll get to where they say they're gonna get. There's a part of my brain that's going, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. Like what could go wrong? Like, God forbid, there's a horrible war in the Middle East and the economy goes to hell in a handbasket or something.
yeah. Sure.
I'm certainly not wishing for that,
Yeah.
God knows, but, you know.
It's a good question. It's a good question. And I think, you know, I'm always asking that question, like how confident because I haven't gone to the meetings with Norfolk County, but they have. And the last one they went to, they said every municipality was asking them that question. How confident are you that this is going to be fully funded by 2029? And the answer to that I heard back was very confident. Now, there's a lot that could go wrong, but the beauty with this is that it allows us to react every year. Okay. So we're gonna get an update to how they're doing funding this every year. They're gonna give us new assessments. And, you know, if it's only 4 or 5 years away, there's not a lot of room for them to screw it up at this point. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, I mean, unless the actuaries are just totally off.
Well, I think the other piece though is that the amount that's being drawn down exists, right? The
Yeah, we
3.4
control it.
million,
That's
Right.
how the-
the 3.4 million reserve exists. We're not anticipating growing that.
Norfolk County has nothing to do with
Right,
that.
that's just
Right.
drawing down an
That's
amount
all
that's
totally under
on,
our control.
on Ed's balance sheet.
Yeah.
As it were. So that's a big piece of it.
So if, like, let's play hypothetical, let's say next year they came back and said, oh, you know what, the market's kind of going crazy here, we don't think we're gonna earn the same investment returns that we told you last year, therefore, we're gonna have to up your assessment to 10%, right? So, you know, we could easily just formulate the new numbers on the spreadsheet and decide, you know, well, what does it look like? How does that play out over the next 4 or 5 years? I mean, I doubt they would come back and say 5 years out that it's gonna be 10% a year, each year. They might have 1 year where there's a miss, but can't believe that it would be 10% every single year.
Plus we've got $1 million cushion at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you could see we're taking this last year, we're taking 750,000 out. You know, these numbers get a little progressively bigger, but I mean, there's only, you know, after 25, there's 4 more years, basically.
Right, I think that's another piece.
Kind of, you have to, you know,
These actuarial assumptions get really dicey as they go far out. This is a pretty. close
yeah, when the time is shorter, they're more accurate.
Right.
Because they have less room to screw it up.
When you start looking out to 15, 20 years to some of these other pension plans, that's good cause for conservatism. But you're right, it's an assumption.
So the each year whatever gets taken out of this reserve fund has to go to PERAC. PERAC is the pension employment retirement. What
Public Employment
Employment.
Retirement Advisory Committee.
advisory committee, basically the state advisory committee that oversees Norfolk County. And they under this Mass General Law section that this reserve fund was created, they and whatever we want to take out, they have to approve every year. And they haven't done it yet, but They will eventually.
I don't believe that they've rejected any.
They have not rejected us yet.
They haven't rejected us. We don't anticipate that they rejected it. So that's basically the pension. I guess the next item was really just committee updates. And the school building committee update, any updates?
No update. The next meeting is the 1st of November.
Okay. And capital budget committee, I think we got those updates already, right? Anything,
They met on Friday, but I wasn't there.
anything from the Friday meeting that you want to update us on?
So the primary purpose of the meeting was to review, requests for projects out of the municipal building stabilization fund. So we have a summary for that. We can provide that summary at the next Warrant Committee meeting. Still waiting to hear. I think the chair had proposed a next meeting date of November 2nd. I think we're still waiting to hear if that's gonna work for everyone. And I think at that point, it'd be reasonable to expect that they would vote on both projects for capital stabilization and municipal emergency.
So by the time we meet on the 14th, that'll be. Or no, that's the 4th, when are we meeting? The 13th, yeah. We're meeting on Monday. Yes, okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's select board today, yeah. Okay. All right. Anything, you guys have an update for us?
I have an update for you. So everybody got their fiscal year 24 budget this evening.
Yep. Thank you.
This replaces, we used to put together a notebook for everybody, with the information we thought was helpful. This replaces that and includes all of the information for the budget. If there's something that you think is lacking in here, let us know. Something that's not explained, let us know. We can get you some backup documentation for that. But more importantly, I would like to read to you a letter we received this week. We received from the Government Finance Officers Association. You'll hear us refer to it as the GFOA. They announced that we had achieved the award, a significant achievement by our entity. And this budget document reflects the commitment of the governing body and staff to meeting the highest principles of government budgeting. In order to receive this award, our town had to satisfy nationally recognized guidelines for effective budget presentation. And those guidelines include, this must serve as our policy documents, our financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. And we had 4 independent reviewers who were more than happy to send back their comments to us this week. And they all rated us as proficient in all 4 categories, which means we have received the award officially. So thank you. I really want to thank Frank, who literally the morning after town meeting, while I was out there celebrating, was actually working on this. So thanks goes to Frank for doing this, Brittany for getting all of it put together and printed at the end. But most importantly, not only town meeting, but the Warrant Committee, who has really helped us the last 2 years and saw the vision of what we wanted to do with this document and really made it happen. So thank you to all of you as well. We're very, very happy to have done it the second year in a row.
Hugely helpful document.
It's, yeah, for new people, this is really.
It was my Bible.
I'm always going back to it.
Yeah.
Really. If you have a question, we'll usually in here.
And we did receive free cash certification. Thank you to Andrew. It is the earliest I can remember in 25 years that we have had free cash certified, which makes our transition to this new budget process so much easier. So kudos to Andrew and his team as well.
And was there a difference between what we looked at and what?
No.
Good
Nope.
job.
Right on.
Right on.
Right on.
Beautiful. Excellent. Excellent. Well, that is good news. That's great news. I just had an informational item. I just had one item that Deb had asked me about. That was an interesting question. You want to pose your question, or
Go ahead.
you want me to?
Yep, you can do it.
in the last state tax reform act, they had passed of course, most of it was around tax relief. But they had in there a provision for the rainy day fund, the statewide stabilization fund. And it had a limit on it of 15, historically had a limit of 15% of revenue.
Oh,
And the provision changed it to 25.5% of revenues. So Deb, being the astute, study of this law, asked the question, how does this impact Medfield? If anything, and I was thinking about it, and I said, well, first I wanted to understand why they did what they did.
right.
And I was reading some articles, and it appears that if you remember, we all got maybe not all of us, but a lot of us got a refund from the state when they collected all this excess revenue, right? There was a provision that said they had to return some of it back. But it turns out there's a similar provision for this this rainy day fund, because it's capped at 15%. If you go over that, you
Right.
have to give the money back to taxpayers. So they raised it to 25.5.
So it must already be over 15.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna digress for a minute. So
So they don't-
we bought a new washer and dryer with that wonderful refund last November. So far be it for me to complain about it. But then we found out like a couple months later that the state had claimed federal monies would pay for certain unemployment benefits, and they didn't, and we now owe the feds $2.5 billion. Was that payment to us because we had too many revenues, a gross miscalculation of what was actually in the treasury, because no one had yet figured out about that unemployment snafu?
I don't know. It's
It's all the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do-
I'm grateful for the Warrant
Right.
washer and dryer. Don't
Yeah,
get me
yeah,
wrong.
I think some of it was also the ARPA money was considered as revenue that came in, so that also impacted their balance sheet as well.
But the question that she originally asked was, how does this impact Medfield? And that rainy day fund is basically when there's an economic downturn, right? They sort of, it helps them keep the local aid, flowing to communities. So if there's more in there, theoretically, we wouldn't get cut as much, right? So maybe instead of an 8% cut, which we experienced in 2010 or whatever, maybe we only get like a 4 or 5% cut, I don't know.
Okay.
It's interesting, because they're gonna go from 15 to 25%. They're probably at a 20% now, maybe. They don't want to give it back,
Yeah,
so they'll spend it.
well, no, it's in the rainy day.
And it's
fund.
in the rainy day fund. They'll find a way to get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that.
Increase state aid.
But the increased state aid.
I want to be wrong on our financial forecast on that.
Yeah, right.
Anything else that anyone else has an update
That's
on?
interesting.
Any other informational updates? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right, so go around.
Yes. Yes.
yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and Jill?
Yes.
Excellent. Meeting is adjourned.